I heard a lot more from certain people who were saying that, well, we might as well finish what we started, and this whole kind of, Russian Eastern, we don't want to lose face situation. But I think generally, if you're talking about ordinary people, the Russians want the same thing that people in Ukraine want, to end the war. It's just that they are very powerless, unfortunately.
Since Russia invaded Ukraine nearly 4 years ago, there have been constant reports from Western commentators that Vladimir Putin is losing the support of his people. They are weary of the economic misery occasioned by sanctions, angry at the war dead coming home in body bags, fearful of an outright war with NATO. There is always something slightly optimistic in the flavour of these reports, much like those which speculated upon the ill health and Putin himself and suggested he'd be dead by Christmas. But Putin, of course, is still there. And there is no reason to suspect that the Russians do not, in the main, back his bloody adventure in Ukraine. But is the tide changing? Jana Bakunina is a Russian author and journalist who has written a book, The Good Russian. She travelled back to her home country and specifically the city of Ekaterinburg to explore the mindset of a people who are, lest we forget, also the victims of Putin's fury and his loathing of the West. I'm delighted to say she joins me in the studio now. Jana, thanks so much for coming in. Is the public still largely with Putin in this exercise?
Unfortunately, I would have to say yes. Albeit I did have a look at the latest polls. Now, of course, polls in Russia are not as independent as, YouGov here. So literally you have a pollster on the street coming up to you and saying, I'm a foreign agent. Would you like to answer some questions? But nevertheless, I had a look that, about 60% of the people want Russia to start peace negotiations. And another interesting statistic.
That is quite interesting, isn't it? That's surely a change.
I probably should have had a look what it was before, but I would not be surprised if exactly the same answer would come up 2 years ago when I was there. And by the way, 30% support the kind of, the continuation of the, of the special military operation, as it's called there. I think maybe 2 years ago, I heard a lot more from certain people who were saying that, well, we might as well finish what we started, and this whole kind of, Russian Eastern, we don't want to lose face situation. But I think generally, if you're talking about ordinary people, the Russians want the same thing that people in Ukraine want, to end the war. It's just that they are very powerless, unfortunately.
Oh, that's interesting. That's rather more optimistic than I'd imagined. And you did a lot of your work in Ekaterinburg, didn't you? Which kind of interesting, because one of the things we talk about when we talk about Russia is its tendency to look to the east or its tendency to look to the west. And there's probably no better city to judge that, given that it sits exactly on the boundary of those two vague geographical definitions. Do the people in Ekaterinburg look towards, do they wish to emulate Europe, or do they look more towards the East and the totalitarian regimes in China and so on?
Well, that's an interesting question. And I think the truthful answer is that there are many opinions. So there are certain people, and they tend to be more liberal, who are looking to the West, and they're, reading independent media sources using VPNs on their phones or tablets. And so, they are certainly kind of more Western looking, albeit, they also have certain opinions that, they might say that the West has kind of let us down because, people have forgotten about us. I'm sure you've heard that, they can't use their bank cards, the travel restrictions, that's actually very new. So the fact that the European Union decided to implement something they've already been doing in practice without it being sort of cast in stone, that is to give visas only for a short period of time. So
are these things actually biting? Do the Russian public hate these impositions, and does it make them tend more to support Putin or less to support Putin?
I think that ultimately such a measure doesn't affect the majority of the population because, you know, how many people can actually afford travel to Europe.
Okay.
But obviously it doesn't look very good. So it implies that, you know, the West is looking at Russia and Putin as one entity. So the people are the same as the Kremlin, which is, of course, not the case. But there are other people in Russia who are, and this is interesting because some of these people I went to school with, and I remember they had very different views many years ago, but they're now saying that, well, Russia has its own path and we should never have looked at the West. We really look at China, they're doing great. And so they're looking mostly at sort of economic development. And I think that's probably something that we discount here in the West a little bit, because we are doing very well economically in terms of standard of living, generally speaking.
Not in Russia?
No, here in the West.
Here, yeah.
So we are talking about, sort of civil liberties as something that, you know, because we can go out and buy whatever we want. And I think in Russia, it's a little bit different. It's the economic stability and livelihood are still sort of front of people's minds.
Well, it is fascinating, isn't it? Because this has been true for 1,000 years of Russian history, hasn't it? One moment it looks to the West, then it's sometimes rebuffed, and the West doesn't treat it very well, and it looks back to the East. And it's happened with Peter the Great. It's happened all the way through history.
It's the two-headed eagle.
It's the two-headed eagle, yes, that's absolutely right. The other thing which has come up, I mean, you say 60% of Russians that you saw in an opinion poll wish for some sort of peace talks to take place. Do you suspect that this 28-point peace plan, which Zelensky and Putin and Trump and now the leaders of European countries are considering, would that meet with the approval of Russians, and would they consider it, because this is quite crucial and certainly crucial for Europe, would they consider it a victory for Vladimir Putin, do you think?
Well, I don't think it'll go ahead because I don't think it'll be acceptable to Ukraine. And from the Russian point of view, I saw a very short clip yesterday from the Kremlin, and there showed Putin, who wasn't impressed with it himself, if you believe it.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people in Russia and that's again obviously people with kind of liberal leanings, so they just don't watch TV. So they would say, well, we've seen it all before, we don't believe anything would happen. So there is a view in Russia among kind of anyone actually that this is going to go on for a very, very long time.
Right, that's interesting. So if we're looking for it to end on Thursday at tea time, it's not likely to be like that.
I think even when that summit in Alaska happened, I think we here in the West were a little bit excited. In Russia, people are just, oh well, another summit, another 28 peace plan.
Yeah,
I think that's I don't think that people are probably excited about the weekend.
Yes.
What are they doing?
What are they doing at the weekend? Yeah,
the snow has fallen down, that kind of stuff. Yeah,
there was a rather wonderful film on British television recently, which I suspect you probably saw or certainly would have known about, which was about a teacher living in a Russian city. And it was about the increase in propaganda which went into the schools as soon as Putin launched the war in Ukraine. And he recorded all this and then got the hell out of the country rather quickly. Did we see a massive rise in propaganda when the invasion was launched?
So I'm afraid I haven't seen that film, but
right.
Absolutely yes. You could say that before the full-scale invasion started, they must have planned it a long time ago. Yeah. I talk a lot about it in the book. So we're talking about history textbooks, which have been kind of rewritten and updated. We're talking about the kind of curriculum for young pupils who are literally being educated to become soldiers and breeders of soldiers, if I can put it this way.
Yes.
So it's becoming very patriarchal society. A woman should know her place.
More conservative,
and also it's kind of that idea that, you you have to sacrifice yourself for the good of the country, for the mighty Russia. So it's
that's kind of Soviet, isn't it? There's a Soviet flavour.
I think
to
it's
that.
even beyond Soviet. It's kind of this whole kind of Russian Empire. It's this sort of idea that we are. I'm saying we are, and I'm thinking, do I really mean that? But the Russian people are unique people with the unique fate. And fate is, again, also become quite a big thing. I think it's because people are generally just helpless and they don't think they're in charge, which of course they're not. It's not like they can, choose the next president. So they're basically being told this is what's happening and you either comply or else.
Jana Bakunina, I could have talked all afternoon about this. So thank you very much for joining us. Jana's book, The Good Russian, is available at timesbookshop.co.uk, where Times Plus members will enjoy a 20% discount on that and thousands of other titles.